If you have trouble finding 1 Thessalonians, that's because it is hard to find. It's a small book there at the end portion of the New Testament. If you hit Hebrews or Revelation, you've got to hang a left and go back the other direction. If you find Romans or Galatians, start going right, and you shall find 1 Thessalonians. First Thessalonians is considered to be Paul's first letter, his first missionary epistle. As he had gone through the area of Greece and Asia Minor planting churches, he now circles back to write to some of those churches. And here we have a letter to the Thessalonians. Paul one day received a vision from the Lord. And he saw a man of Macedonia. Now, what's Macedonia, you might ask? Well, Greece divides into two sections. Southern Greece, where Corinth is, called Achaia. And then there's Macedonia, the northern region of Greece, where places like the Thessalonian church were located. And Paul had it in his mind to go and visit far-off lands and to take the gospel. But he was stopped in his tracks by this vision of a man from Macedonia, from the land of the Thessalonians, saying, "Come and help us. Come and help us." And Paul understood this to be a vision given to him from God, that he should take the gospel to Macedonia, that he should bring the gospel message, the saving message of the cross of Christ, the gospel of Jesus Christ, to people like those Thessalonians in Thessalonica. And so he had gone there, and we'll look more in a future study at how this church was founded and many of the afflictions that took place and the persecutions that they endured even at their very founding. But we will save that for a future study, as Paul mentions it here in the letter. But he went and he founded this church under severe persecution. And this church, this community built by the gospel of Jesus Christ, was one that really captured Paul's heart. As you read through his letters, Paul had many adventures in many places, brought the gospel to many people in different parts of the world, and he would write letters. But when you read the letters of the Thessalonian church, you really see that these people made a great impact on the heart of the apostle. And it comes shining through in his words to them. These were people who truly loved the Lord, who were touched by the Spirit of God, who received the gospel of Jesus Christ, and it changed their life. It changed the community in which they lived because of the testimony which they had in their city. And to me, the Thessalonian church, as we read about it in these two letters, is truly an example of what real Christianity is all about. They give us a picture of what true Christianity should look like. We should be able to compare our lives to their lives. Even though boundaries of countries and continents separate us, oceans separate us, time separates us, and yet if we believe that the gospel is ageless, and that Jesus is the rock of ages, and that he changes not, that he is the same yesterday, today, and forever, then I submit to you that the gospel likewise, that the power of the gospel today is the power of the gospel from yesterday. And that the way it changed people back then is the way it should change people today. And if we don't look like the Thessalonians, then we should strive to look like the Thessalonians. If we find things missing in our lives, missing in our church that seems to have been present in their lives and in their church, it sets a standard for us to live up to strive to imitate. So Paul says to this church, and as we will see, they are a beloved congregation to them. He writes, by way of introduction, Paul, Silvanus, and Timothy. Now we believe Silvanus is probably Silas. What a man he was. We know all about Paul, Saul of Tarsus, who was converted on the road to Damascus, who became the great apostle Paul. We know his story quite well, but Silas, perhaps we don't know his story as well. I was struck by Luke's comment in the book of Acts, I believe it's in chapter 15, where Silas is one of the men that is called upon, Paul and Barnabas, Silas and some others. The church gets together, they have a sort of a conference on what do we do with Gentiles getting saved. Do Gentiles have to first become Jews before they can become Christians? If a Gentile converts to Christianity, does he now have to keep the dietary laws of Moses? Does he have to become kosher? Does he have to follow our feast days and things of that nature? So the church got together and said, okay, what is the gospel? What does the gospel mean for a Gentile who comes into this very Jewish church at the time? And so the church got together, and James there led their meeting and their discussion. And there, they determined from the scriptures that the gospel of Jesus Christ sets a man free from the law, sets a man free from rituals. And so they wanted to send this letter telling the Gentile churches, okay, you are not bound under the law of Moses. Yes, you should live holy and blameless, godly lives. Don't be immoral. The Christian church should have a standard of morality because we want to walk as Jesus walked. They did mention that. And so now they sent this letter out. And Silas was one of the couriers. And we read there Luke's comment about Silas, that he was considered a prophet there in the early church. So Silas isn't just sort of a tag-along. This is a great man filled with the Holy Spirit of God, used mightily by God's Spirit in the earliest days of the church. And then Timothy, of course, that loyal son of the faith, as Paul called him. Paul would say, I don't know anybody who has the same mindset and passion that I do quite like Timothy. He is a like-minded, I have never met someone so like-minded as I am. So this trio here is a dynamic trio. This is a powerful trio. Paul, Silvanus, and Timothy, their names should be known as those who brought the gospel out. Men who were dependable, trustworthy, powerful, filled with the Spirit. And it says, to the church of the Thessalonians in God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. This isn't just any assembly. This is God's people. This isn't just any congregation. These are the people of God who have been saved by Jesus Christ. And he says, grace to you and peace. Grace to you and peace. Yes, indeed, this is a typical greeting of the day. And yet, in the Christian context, grace is so much more than just have a nice day. Oh, may fortune smile upon you. When Christians speak of grace, this term is theologically loaded. This simple word is full of the truth of the Scripture. Grace. God is gracious to you. May God's grace smile upon you, like the old priestly blessing there in Numbers chapter 6, I believe it is. where it says, may the Lord's face smile upon you. And then peace. The gospel declares we are enemies against God, rebels in the sight of God, under the judgment of God. John goes as far as to remind people, just in case you forgot, as you were born into the world, you were born under condemnation already. And yet, through Christ, we have peace. And he says, we give thanks to God always for you all, making mention of you in our prayers. Whenever Paul would bend the knee before God, whenever he would offer a prayer, in these early days of his missionary work, his mind would quickly be brought back to his time with the Thessalonians. He says, I have not forgotten you. There's no way I could forget about you. You are an incredible congregation, a Spirit-filled congregation. You have blessed me more than you could know. And when I pray, I think of you and I thank God for you. Remembering without ceasing your work of faith, your labor of love, and your patience of hope in our Lord Jesus Christ in the sight of our God and Father, knowing, beloved brethren, your election by God. When I think about you, I see people who have been chosen by God, God's special, peculiar people. Paul didn't look at the Thessalonians like some other congregations that he might have thought about later on in his years, like the carnal church of Corinth, like the Judaizers in Galatia, where Paul had many strong words for those people, for those congregations, where Paul would defend himself and where Paul would call out their heresies. Paul might doubt the salvation of some in those churches. But when he thinks of the Thessalonians, oh, you are truly God's people. I can see God's hand upon you. I can tell that you are the elect of God. You are God's people. You are God's own. You are God's chosen. When I look at you, there's just no doubt. I can see the incredible work of God's Spirit in your midst. And I am thoroughly convinced that you belong to Him. And that we as a family truly belong together. We are one in the gospel and one in the Spirit and one in the election of God. We could emphasize that point further, but what I want to focus in on today, as we look at the Thessalonians as an exemplary church, as we think about what it means to identify ourselves as Christians, I want to notice how Paul speaks about them. There in verse 3. He speaks about three things around this famous trilogy of faith, hope, and love. But he lists it as their work of faith, their labor of love, and their patience of hope. These are three things that, bar none, must be something that is part of a Christian's experience, part of a Christian testimony, part of a Christian church. You cannot have genuine Christianity without the things that these three things represent. Work of faith. Let's start there. It's an interesting way to phrase it, isn't it? Paul, this famous apostle that Martin Luther so heavily depended on as he went through his book of Romans and Galatians, talking about faith, justification by faith apart from works, right? Where we don't merit salvation, but that justification is by faith alone. And yet here, Paul speaks about the work of faith. Now, he does not mean a faith that comes from works. He speaks here about a work that comes from faith. And it reminds us that in the Christian life, there should be work that I do, ministry that I perform, things that I'm a part of, things that I'm engaged in, conduct that I am known by, that separates me from the world in this way. It's a work of faith. I look at it this way. It's things that I wouldn't do except for my faith in Jesus Christ. Because I have been saved and redeemed, because I have faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, I am now engaged in things that I wouldn't have been a part of otherwise. I certainly, in a personal way, standing before you, giving here a message from the Scriptures, this is not something I would be doing, I would be involved with, if I wasn't saved, if I didn't have faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. This is a work that I only accomplish because I have been saved. Whether it's working out on the church grounds, I'm often telling my sons and my daughter, look, the only reason we do this is because we believe God is watching us, looking down upon us. And so we work as those who are in His sight. We work as those who are His people. And we treat this place, some might drive by and say, what an interesting looking church. Doesn't quite look like a normal church. And yet we see it as the house of God, and we treat it like that. We don't treat it the way it looks. We treat it because of who it belongs to. But this is a work of faith. Nobody else would bother about it, but because we've been saved, we do things that we wouldn't do otherwise. We get involved in works that we would never be a part of otherwise. Paul the Apostle, what a great example. Here he is, a Pharisee of the Pharisees, right? And he's going around persecuting the church, getting warrants for people's arrest in the church. He's going around wreaking havoc among Christians. He would never be caught dead behind the pulpit of a church. He wouldn't be caught dead associating in a friendly manner and eating with other Christians. No way, they're the enemy. But then he's saved. And suddenly, his works change, and they begin to reflect his faith. Things that he would have never done before, he wouldn't be caught dead doing. Suddenly, I'm compelled by the love of Christ, as he would say, to do these things, to preach the gospel, to build up the church which I once sought to destroy. Why would we spend time in prayer? Why would we spend time in the Scriptures? Why would we spend time helping others or loving people or sharing the gospel or whatever it might be? Think of something that you do because you're saved. Something that you know, if I wasn't saved, I would not be doing that. And that's a work of faith. And so, as we look at this church as an exemplary church, we want to ask ourselves then. For instance, if we can't see ourselves, well, there's nothing I do that I wouldn't do if I wasn't saved. There's nothing I do since I've been saved that I wasn't doing before. My life isn't different. My work isn't different. My actions, my conduct isn't different. Well, then there's a problem. And I'm afraid that's a lot of what we see in the church today. We see a church full of people who their life hasn't changed since they have made a profession of faith. Their life isn't different even though they may go to church. There's nothing that separates them from the world around them. Their light is so dim when they walk into the darkness of the world, nothing is affected. Nobody is the wiser. Nothing is the brighter. They're not salt in a thirsty land. They're not light in the darkness. There is nothing in their life that pushes them to work by faith, that pushes them to work because of their faith, that pushes them to serve the Lord. The American Western church seems to be known by its cliches, its bumper stickers. Everybody likes to wear a cool bracelet. It's become very cultural. It's become very cool and faddish and hip. We have a subculture of Christianity. And you can see somebody. You can tell, oh, look, they got that, what would Jesus do? Or they got that little cross, or they got this, or they got that. There's the bumper sticker. Oh, and look at that bumper sticker. It's against Darwinism, because you've seen the fish that the evolutionists put feet on. And then there's the shark fish that eats that fish, showing that, well, Jesus is still the truth. And we're fighting on the freeway between who's got the best bumper sticker. And yet, what are we doing? What are we doing? I'm afraid the church is more involved in Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok than they are in real life. I think we think defending the faith or evangelism is just what I do on my phone, rather than who I am in my heart. And sometimes I think the only reason we send out a snarky tweet against some blasphemer is just because we want to get even, rather than we want to speak the truth. See, a work of faith is so different. A work of faith, something we do because of our faith. It comes from down deep within. It comes from the Holy Spirit who has changed us and regenerated us. And it is something by which we can be identified. We could linger, but we must go on. Labor of love. I grew up in a church context where we could sing "Toiling On," bringing in the sheaves. And a lot of music had to do with really hard work. And my grandparents, who had founded the church that I grew up in, lots of labor. That's all they ever thought about is labor, 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 toil. What can we do? How can we strive? What's the next mountain to climb? There was never an end, but there was always a goal. The work never ceased, but there was always a point and a purpose on ahead. Labor. I look at Christians today, I look at the church today, and bless the Lord for those who do labor, but I'm afraid they are the exception rather than the rule. I think in our age of convenience, laziness and lethargy has crept into the church as much as it has crept into all parts of our society. I complain often to my wife and to my kids how often I am disappointed with my fast food hamburger. I was even discussing this with my mother this morning. And just talking about it seems like nobody cares about their labor. It seems like nobody really puts themselves behind their labor. Like nobody cares about quality and something that is worthwhile in doing, whether it's a hamburger or whether it's a farm or whether it's whatever it is. It's like there's not this concept of striving and labor to do something good. Now I speak of a hamburger, but I'm afraid that same lethargy creeps right into the church, where pastors don't want to dig into the Word. No, Andy Stanley says, this Old Testament is so big and so full of mystery and so full of difficult stories, we really need to unhitch the Old Testament from our Bible, from our faith, and from our churches, and just push it off into the distance over there. Let it roll downhill. We don't need that. And then when he begins to speak of the New Testament, well, we should never say the Bible says, like he's famous for preaching the sermon that we don't want to ever say, Jesus loves me, the Bible tells me so. We don't want to speak as if we get our beliefs from a book. And he's really quite against preaching the Bible. Well, we should say what Paul said, or what James said, or what Peter said. I don't know how that makes a difference. It doesn't seem rational to me. But somehow he feels that the world will listen to us if we quit preaching the Bible and we just say, well, Paul said so. And I just find that odd. Because don't we believe that the Spirit says so? That the Spirit inspired Paul, that it's not Paul's words. That the Spirit inspired Peter, it's not Peter's words.
Amen.
But see, we have a lazy theology. We have lethargy in the pulpit, which makes lethargy in the pews, where there's no labor in the Scripture, and so there's no labor in the pew. There's no labor in the church. There's no striving. There's no coming together. And Paul speaks of a labor of love. And I think we all know what that means. We all know what it means to do something that is horrendously hard and difficult, but we do it because of the love we have for somebody. We get together, and because of this person or because of that thing, we get together and we do something hard and difficult. You see, it was hard and difficult what Paul and Silas and Timothy did. It was hard and difficult for the early church who lived in a world of paganism. It was hard to go preach the gospel where the gospel had really never been heard. It was hard to found churches under persecution. Persecution religious by the Jews, persecution political by the Romans. It was difficult. It wasn't easy, but it was a labor of love. And Paul said, I can see that in the Thessalonian church. I can see that you're motivated not by, is this easy or hard? Is this manageable? Is this manageable? Do you think I can do this? Or is it, you know what? I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And I don't think I can do this, but I must do this. I think this will be hard, but I have to do it anyway. This is really going to take a lot from me, but I must proceed. Jesus reminded us about the man who counted the cost. Or I think in his story, he didn't count the cost, and so he reminds us we should count the cost. But I think Christians, we have a whole new interpretation of counting the cost. Here's how we look at it. Oh, it looks too hard. I'm counting the cost. Not for me. Count me out. I'm not going to be involved. And that is not what Jesus or the apostles were trying to pass on. They weren't trying to say, be as lazy as you can. Just float downstream with the rest of the dead fish. Don't ever do anything that matters. Don't let your life be full of meaning. No, a labor of love is something that the Thessalonians were known for. When Paul would go to pray, he would think about these people who their life had been changed by the Holy Spirit of God. And so the things that they did had been changed. They had different work, and they had a different way of working. Something that Paul could say, you guys labor, you guys anguish for the gospel. In the American church, we can hardly get people to show up for prayer meeting. In fact, if you call it prayer meeting, it's like a death sentence. You might as well not open the door that day. If you called it a prayer meeting, you put it out in front, well, I'm not going. Because we don't know how it is to labor in prayer. And you might look around and say, oh, well, you guys got a little church, so that's just how you feel about it. Well, you know what's amazing? I have been in a mega church or two. And yes, they are crowded. Hard to find a parking space on Sunday morning. Oh, and we better go to 2 and 3 services because there's so many people flocking in. Well, if they still have a night service, go to that one. You can park wherever you want. You can sit wherever you want. And you'll hardly bump an elbow on your way in and out of the service, out of the biggest of churches. It's out of the biggest of churches. So, 3 Sunday morning services, they can't even pack the church for one service for a prayer meeting. Or for a midweek, even smaller. So, the church right now is living under this facade. Oh, look, all these mega churches. But how many people are getting together to labor in prayer? How many people are getting together to truly labor out of the love for Christ that they have, to serve their fellow man? Who's doing this? The mega churches have nice bookstores, but they're not building hospitals. The mega churches have great concerts and the fog machines and the lights and everything, and you can have a great time. But whose lives are changing? It doesn't look like anybody's lives are changing. Where's the labor of love? It is turned into a lethargy of entertainment. Oh, just let me sit in here and enjoy the show. Oh, we're going to unhitch the Old Testament? Okay. I wasn't reading it anyway. We're going to close up the New Testament and just preach a bunch of self-help sermons? Well, good. I hate reading. I get bothered. I really do. When I hear so many people, well, I'm just not a reader. I just don't enjoy reading. Interesting. That's where the church has come. We have more Bible translations than any other language in the world, like by a lot. We have more Bible helps than any other country on the planet, by a lot. Nobody has more than what the American English-speaking church has, and we want nothing more than to just push it aside. No labor of love for me. When Paul thought of these Thessalonians, he saw people that took their faith seriously. They were regenerated. The Holy Spirit had exploded within them and had created with them a desire to really work because of their faith, to labor because of their love for Christ. And then, of course, finally, it gave them a patience of hope in the Lord Jesus. It is really hard to have patience if you don't have hope in front of you. If you're just waiting and you don't know what for, what am I doing here? What's the point? But if you are patiently waiting because you have an assured hope of what's coming, oh, what a difference that makes. Now, I could stand, or a couple weeks ago, I was sitting in an airplane wondering if we're ever going to take off. Wondering if they're just going to cancel the flight. I didn't have any hope. I just had a lot of waiting. However, getting to know a young lady who was never late for anything, who was always very punctual, when I would wait for Marie, oh, my hope was assured. This is someone dependable. This is somebody loyal. I know that my patience will pay off. I know that as I wait here to pick her up, she will eventually come out. See, we have the hope of Christ in his coming. Paul's going to speak of the coming of Christ over and over and over again in this letter. And the Thessalonians, even as new Christians, they had latched on to this. Even though they had suffered severely, as we will talk about later, they had suffered and yet they had hope. They believed that Christ would keep his promise. They believed that Christ would return and that they would see his coming and be redeemed, that they would be vindicated, that those who persecuted them and afflicted them would be judged, that there would be a great day of equalization, that the tables would be flipped, that those who were suffering now would be the triumphant, and that those who were stepping on the Christians would then be those who were under the foot of Christ. There would be a great justice that was coming. And this kept them moving forward. And so Paul says, I look at your work of faith, your labor of love, your patience in the hope of Christ. And what must my conclusion be? One thing. Knowing that you, my beloved brethren, you've been chosen by God. You're the real deal. There is no denying your faith. There is no denying your church. There is no denying the Spirit's work in your life. You are God's people. And so the point is simply this. When people look at us, can they tell that we're God's people? Can they tell? Would somebody look at you and say, chosen by God, no doubt? Nobody else would do that kind of work. Nobody else would labor like that, with love in their heart, while they're in the trenches doing something I wouldn't do. And what is this great hope that they have? What does Peter say about that? Always be ready to give an answer for the hope that you have. Can people tell that you have a hope? Can people tell that you're looking forward, that you're seeking first the kingdom of God? Can people tell that you're waiting for the return of Christ? Can people tell by your life that, yeah, you are living as if Jesus is coming back? You are living as if you are Jesus' chosen vessel. It makes a difference. And for Paul, it blessed his heart. And he says, I pray for you. And whenever I pray for you, I think about you. And you encourage me, you inspire me. Let our Christianity be like that.